Awesome. And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. I just copy and paste for folks that just joined the meeting notes talk. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees. We'll be following along in the agenda that was created in the RFC's issue 526, which I'll also copy and paste for folks. And just quickly, a quick reminder, this call and all comms on the RFC's repo are covered under their code of conduct, which we ask people to please abide by. Please be kind to others on these calls and raise your hand if someone else is speaking. We'll call on you and hopefully have a good discussion. Quickly want to give some time for any announcements folks might have. The one that we've been shouting out in the last couple of weeks that I know of is the OpenJS World Conference. It has their CFP open and it will be closing next week. I believe it's next Friday, so please get your talks in. Our team hopefully will be joining others at that conference and joining in also on the Collaborator Summit. So would love to see y'all there, and hopefully folks feel like they've got some good content to share after a couple of years of not going to conferences. So yeah, just want to recognize that as well. And if there's no other announcements, we will be moving on to the agenda. So first item we have here is PR number 343. This is NPM workspace auto switching. Or context auto switching. I copy and paste the RC for reference. Roy, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. Yeah, this is basically for RFC to make sure anyone working on workspaces, most users would expect when you navigate to a nested folder that whatever command you run there, it will just behave as just a connected workspace to your root project. So yeah, this is basically the proposal to make NPM kind of aware of that and auto switch the context depending on whether you're navigating a workspace currently or not. And yeah, so basically we're already working on it and we're ready to ratify this, like approve this RFC. Unless someone screams a last-minute objection to it, but I guess we kind of already worked out through the comments. Jordan?
I just want to confirm the comment I posted in March of like with the 5 bullet points. Is that still essentially the plan? If that's still the plan, I'm happy with it. I just wanted to make sure that nothing had evolved since then.
Can you copy and paste the reference?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
there's not that many comments on the PR, but I will paste the link in the chat.
Yeah.
There you go.
So no, that's not the case.
Okay.
There was a lot of back and forth with this
right.
one.
So that's kind of what I mean. Is it's so it seems like it needs a fresh review since it's changed a lot since then. The hope, I think, was that because there's different models of workspaces, right? Some of them are, one model is that child packages only should be used in the context of the larger monorepo, the larger workspace. And another is that child packages should operate as if they lived on their own, but also be usable with the context of the monorepo. And I have a lot of use cases for the second one, but some people have a lot of use cases for the first one, and they're all fine, but we need to make a way to do that. And the original thing that we talked about in this comment I linked was about the NPM RC in each child workspace as something that an explicit config that defaults to the first use case of everything is and everything is part of the workspace. But that can be explicitly changed so that so that my use case can go with it, and then NPM would respect that after that. the exact details of the implementation are not as important, but the ability to commit into Git something that tells npm that I want that tells npm which of those two modes to use seems important to me.
Right.
Is that something we still have?
Yeah. Well, do you want to add something, Darcy?
I can't speak to the exact implementation that Nilf has been working on. So Roy, you might know this because I believe you did review it. So, but yeah, I would expect that we would still be able to potentially opt you out. Like that's, if we don't have that mechanism, then Jordan, you're right that there needs to be something like that to explicitly opt out. And I actually do think it exists. It's just the workspaces flag equal false. And so that.
But if I have workspaces set to false, then doesn't that mean that I can't do like I still, my use case is still like, for example, Enzyme. Individual packages, it's very important to me that they be able to operate as if they were in their own repo. However, I also need to be able to run them to link things across with the entire workspace. So I can't just disable the workspaces config, nor can I just use the everything always operates in workspace mode, because then I'm not getting the proper isolation and testing that I want. So I think it needs to be a config item that is separate from workspace mode. It's like which kind of workspace mode I'm in.
So the npm RC, you can set workspaces equal false in an npm RC file inside of the nested workspace, so that when you run the command inside of that workspace, then you are basically opting into that I want to run.
Okay, but if I run it at the top, then it's
if I ran at the root, then it will ignore that and it will still work the same. So you get the best of both worlds. And the reason why, and the reason why we've opted in for the auto detection after over a year of consideration, and I know Roy brought this up, is that we've been hearing from so many people that this is the way that their existing workspace tooling works, and their expectations are, you need to auto detect this. Like there's so many people that are actually on the other end of the spectrum that aren't power users, let's say, of workspaces that are falling into the trap of CDing into a project and creating, numerous lock files.
There's no argument for me at all. The defaults you've chosen are correct and ideal. I'm just making sure that there's an escape hatch. Yeah,
there is. So Roy, cool. I saw your hand was up there, but did you want to add to anything I said?
I was going to explain the exact thing you explained in a much more concise way, so thank you for that.
Cool. Happy to know we're on the same page there. So this is one that I think we put on the agenda because we'd like to ratify it, but it's great that we put it on here just to ensure everybody's on the same page. Any other comments or questions about this from folks?
I believe one thing we just mentioned that I might review and add the last minute here before accepting, but also could be nice to add a note on how users can use an npm RFC with workspaces false to opt out, like we just mentioned the example here, right? I think using no workspaces or setting workspace to false is already in there as a way to opt out, but I think it's also nice to have the example of having it as part of the npm RFC of a workspace.
Awesome. I think that's a great last step before we ratify it. Roy, thank you for doing that. And thank you for championing this all along the way. I continued to eat my own words a year ago. So thanks for pushing this through. Cool. Moving on to the next RFC, which I think we also want to maybe quickly, not quickly, but we'd like to make some work happen on this, which is RC 516. This is essentially improving the deprecated packages user experience. And we think this is a great incremental step. I've just copy pasted the RFC here. Roy, I think, has just this morning cleaned up the RFC a little bit, added a few more examples, and we've gone further down the road of outlining what the subcommand deprecations looks like. So maybe you can speak to that, Roy.
Sure. So yeah, basically bringing on the result of the discussions from the last previous 2 weeks, we will basically talk about this RFC in both of these, and I think we landed in a very good place with them. So it's just a minute.
No worries.
Really sorry about it, but I was going to say that the main changes here is that we got rid of the augmenting the other related commands like ls, explain. It was there originally. We decided to narrow the scope to just removing the warning message during npm install and getting that notification at the end there. And now, as Darcy alluded to, we kind of expanded a little bit more on the top level commands. So the npm deprecations, we also give it some more examples here. And thanks to Jordan, kind of copying a little bit of his rationale from his module, deprecations module. So you can also npm deprecations a single package to retrieve basically deprecation info for a given package. So you can have that in either JSON output or human printable, which will be the default in the npm CLI. So yeah, I think we landed in a very good place here with this RFC now, and I think it should be ready to be approved.
Any feedback from folks, or if you've taken a look at it right now?
Looks awesome to me. I just approved it with some like a TLDR of my understanding of the current state. If all of that understanding is correct, more or less, then I'm super on board. I would love to deprecate my own deprecations package.
Does this provide any path on how to address it? Like how to address deprecations? Or is it just assumed that that's what people will put in the deprecation message?
Yeah, for now it's surfacing messages from that the author published when they decide to deprecate. Yeah.
I mean, I think the general answer for that is upgrade. And if upgrading isn't the easy solution, then the deprecation message content should tell you what to do.
Cool. Sounds good.
And one note, Jordan, that I put there in chat, your module may still have life, given the fact that
it actually doesn't take multiple packages. I was just, there's an example in that RFC that implied that it took multiples, which was, unless...
No, I meant your npm deprecations. It has an example where it can take multiples. I don't think ours is.
Line 103 in this PR has npm deprecations once ipsum at 2.00, and then it prints out both packages. So that was where
I mean, accepting a package for deprecation. So like npm deprecations and then package would work similar to like npm ls package spec. Whereas like, I think your personal npm deprecations package, you can run deprecations, foo, bar,
outside of a project. Oh, so you're saying that this is the same way npm ls works, where it only looks at the reified node modules.
Correct.
And talks about it. Okay.
And we have another item on. It's not exactly like ls, but yeah. Go ahead.
I actually had in my mind more like outdated or some other. We have some other example of commands that actually look up directly to the registry, and I think it is probably the right thing to default to in this case. Like
the only problem is if then we're going to require, then we can't do. How do we do all -- all?
Oh, but then but like similar to other commands we have, right? It's the no arguments that would look up into your current installed package. If you're providing arguments, then you're always checking against the registry, like similar to the outdated.
So in other words, my assumption is that you provide a list of positionals, and that list is optional. And if you don't provide it, it uses dot as the positional. Or something similar, like file : / dot, or whatever gross thing would mean the current directory, right? And like,
yes,
that's how I would assume it works.
It's kind of a special syntax, right? That will probably be better expressed with the query proposal Darcy has brewing now. But yeah, basically no arguments means top direct dependencies of your current root. Then we added the option of using --all to printing like anything you find in that current installed tree. And if you're using arguments, then it just means look up that package in the registry. Yeah.
That might be, I'm a bit concerned about folks being confused about what they're seeing there. Because if we're, yeah, I just might be confused because we're changing what information we're bubbling up really, because it's with no arguments, no positional, we're showcasing things that are local, deprecated packages that are local. Yeah, and then by saying, let's say I have React as a deprecated, has a deprecated version locally, I run npm deprecations React, like it seems like if we went and fetched latest or went and fetched all, I guess it's all versions that come back.
You don't have to auto select latest. You could auto select the currently installed one when there's no at attached.
Yeah,
like that. You could make React just be your local React version. But if I type React at latest, yeah,
we should document that explicitly. Yes. So I don't think we have at all in this RFC. So.
No. We should probably document a little bit better yeah. But another thing I just wanted to ask Jordan, I see in your example here, what is the --only flag that you have?
If I want to see deprecations in my current project, but only the deprecations of runtime deps, because who gives a crap if dev deps are deprecated? Or if I only want to see the deprecations of dev deps because I only want to fix the easy stuff that won't risk breaking production right now.
Right. So --prod just support.
I mean, almost like every single command npm has that looks at my current package JSON, I expect to support --only and let me filter by category.
Yeah. Okay. I think we will get it for free by just virtue of using Arborist and the configs. Yeah.
Right. I agree.
Cool.
Yeah. Similarly, like -- before, like all the magic things you get with Arborist, like I expect you to get those on any command that looks at your project's package JSON.
So yeah, I'll try to document all these details a little bit better here. But I think what we really want to land on then is, like Darcy said, it has to be similar to LS, kind of inspecting the current tree all of the time. But then maybe if we are using anything, if we're at a tag or a specific version, look up the registry. So at least people have the option of just looking up the registry directly.
I would use npm show as the model for that. Because it's like, I think that npm ls is kind of specific. And I think that with no arguments, people are going to expect npm ls-like behavior. And with a package specifier argument, people are going to expect npm show-like behavior.
That sounds good. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to look into that, and I'm going to expand a little bit more on these details before landing. But otherwise, we might even just land it during the week. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
And then just so I clarified, Jordan, npm show is npm view, right? That's what you mean by that. They're just aliases.
Yeah, it's also npm info. The only alias I know for a command is the one I always type, and I always type show. So I think it's view and info and so on.
Yeah, awesome. I probably don't think the same about add user, but that's it.
Yes, login is also the one I use for that.
Yes, nobody knows about that. Come V9, that will be changed, I promise. Awesome. Any other feedback on the deprecations RFC? Cool. So we'll clean that up, add some more docs, Roy, and then ideally we'll ratify and then we'll hopefully get to work or backlog it. The next item we had was issue 523. This is the just recently created by Jordan. npm explain should work even with an absent log file. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, someone filed an issue. Their issue was in a brand new project. Npm install failed for them, so they didn't have any lock file or node modules or hidden lock file. And Npm explain thus doesn't work. But given that you don't need any of those things for arborists to be able to build a fictional tree, just like Npm audit, there's zero reason why it shouldn't work in a completely brand new project that's never been installed before. Like Arborist has, actual, ideal, and virtual, and ideal works without anything already present on the disk. So why can't we just use it? And in this case, it would have helped this user figure out which top level dependency is responsible for the transitive dependency that's failing their overarching install and completely blocking them from doing anything. So it seemed like very valuable in this use case. And rather than make another package like I did for Npm audit, it seems nicer if Npm just supports this.
Roy?
Yeah, I do like the idea, but it will definitely be something novel, different usage of Arborist for sure. Right now, it's always just inspecting at the current tree we have, right?
I mean, Arborist has 3 modes, right? And I use all 3 of them in my odd package, AUD, right? And like, if you currently are supporting 2 of them, right? Because presumably, I guess I don't know how Npm explain works. Maybe it's all node modules, but like in either way, you're using Arborist to build a tree. And then once Arborist gives you a tree, you don't really care where it came from. So like, all you need is just to get the tree, and you can build that just from package.json.
So
like, and so that's the way I have multiple packages now that have built-in abstraction to get me a tree and to abstract away which kind of tree it is, and and all those things. And then like once I have the tree, all my code's the same after that.
Yeah. But that's a high level, which is very beautiful on the high level of things, but that's not necessarily true, right? What ideal tree might return you does not reflect what might actually end up there. And because today we use always the result of loading the actual tree, so the things that are actually in the file system, right, in your node modules. And it might,
but the ideal tree is how an npm knows to do that.
Almost, because it still lacks, if I recall correctly, it still miss bundle dependencies and shrink wrap at that point. That only gets placed there at refi. So it might differ,
but nobody
right? Like
uses
that's
bundle
a risk.
dependencies outside of NPM.
I know, right? So that's kind of the risks we have to weigh. It's like some ecosystem will rely heavily on them, right? And some other different ecosystem, like you might come on, nobody uses it, right? So I think it's 2 very valid points of view. So we just need to be very careful to not harm, what different ecosystems might.
A simple thing would be if bundled dependencies is present, then you can error out and say, because you're using bundled dependencies, you have to have something installed first. Like that's probably not as good as NPM can do, but that would be an easy way to handle that concern for the many nines of use cases that don't have bundled dependencies.
Mm-hmm. Might be a good point, but also, might be feasible, but it's a very, kind of a very new thing for Arborists to tackle. Along with.
Well, and separately, I would say that the ideal tree should probably be including the stuff, like in Arborist, should probably be including the bundle dependencies anyway. Like it should be taking that, or there should be a way to get the ideal tree, combine it with bundle dependencies, and get what npm install is about to do. And if that's not currently in Arborist, then that seems like a gap in Arborist.
No, it might be already there, actually. I might be also confused. So, it's just that it's the reason why it's not there today for npm explain is that it just looks at the actual tree that is refined. So that's the reason why. So building the ideal tree and looking at that is a possibility for sure.
Awesome.
But we just need to be aware of, it might have these pitfalls and like how we navigate them.
I'm typing that into the RFC.
Okay. I mean, I don't think we're against this, right? Like we're definitely for this. I think it's just requires some work.
Sure.
Yeah. So long as it's the exact same level of accuracy, I would love to know that people could actually generate and run npm explain or other commands like audit, like you noted. So
yeah, well, and I haven't tried npm explain with just a lock file and no node modules, but
should work.
That theoretically should work too. And if that does work, then like as I would expect it to, if I can do npm install package lock, or what is it, package lock only. If I can do that and make a command work, then npm knows how to do that without me typing that. So like the command should support it anyway, right? Like you can, like if npm knows how to make me a package lock file without installing any packages, then why can't it just make a virtual one and do the thing I'm asking it to do?
I guess because we're defaulting into loading the actual like we
no, I mean that's how it's working now. I just mean like conceptually, like my expectation thus is that if anything that can work off a lock file should be able to work without one, because npm already knows how to compute the lock file theoretically.
Have you tried package lock on?
Not for npm explain, because this wasn't my use case like initially. But even if it doesn't work for the lock file and it could, then that's another bonus for explain.
Yeah, I think there's also, there are just some mismatches that can happen between these different types of trees, right? The representations from arborists. So another one from a virtual might have optional dependencies that might not end up in the actual tree, right? So it might just be a defensive way of just avoiding surfacing wrong information, right? So we have to opt in. Like if it works, if you opt in with package lock, like I think that sounds very sensible.
Well, and I would also be very content with if I run npm explain or npm audit or whatever else, and it says, oh, sorry, you need a lock file or node modules present, or you can pass -- fake lock file, and like that's fine with me too. And like you can explain the caveats. You can say, warning, this may not account for optional dependencies bundled. Like I don't care about either of those things in any of my projects. So like that sounds great with me. I just want an easy path so that I don't have to like generate a lock file and then remember to delete it so it's not accidentally included or committed, So.
Yeah, I think also the warning or erroring is important here. It's like we're not even giving enough information for the end user today to explain why they can't run that command, I think. So, yeah. So took some good notes there. Appreciate if we can follow up or keep this on our radar for now. Moving on to RFC 438. I believe this was added by myself and Roy this morning, actually, sort of to tie it together also with the package distributions RFC that we put together, which is PR 519. So the first, let's quickly go through, I guess, the first issue here, the libc fields to help select optional dependencies. I'll quickly reference it for folks. There's quite a bit of discussion on this, and I know Roy actually linked this thread over to package distributions. But it sort of goes, ties back to, I think, something you were saying, Jordan, last week with improving the optional dependency story before even introducing distributions. So I haven't had enough time to really look through this thread. To be quite honest, I haven't had a lot of time to follow up on the package distributions feedback quite yet either. Notably, I'm taking a bit of STO this week, but yeah, just wanted to bring these up. And Jordan, I see your hands up, so feel free to.
Yeah, so because I don't do a lot of work with native packages, right? I did not realize that a top level OS CPU and maybe others fields mattered in package JSON. That seems sort of gross to me that they have to be top level. Like it seems like it might make sense to add a top level field that says something like that relates to the things that optional dependencies or package distributions or whatever look at, and have that thing contain all the conditions. And then whatever is in that whatever is eligible to be in that list, that's the things that engines checks, or that, I don't know if that makes sense for engines, but like I'd have to think this through more. But then rather than adding libc to the top level of package JSON, we could add it to this like nested config object that npm owns that schematically matches whatever npm will check for. And obviously you can't remove the top support for the top level fields that are already there, but they could be like soft deprecated and supported in the new format, and things will eventually move to that. And that seems like a cleaner way to like, because there will be new things in the future, right? Like libc wasn't a thing people cared about back when this was created, and now it is a thing people care about. So there will be bound to be something new people care about in 5 years. And like to have to just keep adding top level package JSON fields seems super gross. So like, I don't know, that's my thought process on it.
Go ahead, Roy. And I see Tierney as well. You've got your mic, you're unmuted if you want to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
No worries. So I was just gonna mention that we looked up, me and Darcy, we were looking at this this morning, and I was precisely bringing up, Jordan, something you alluded to in the previous discussion when we just talked about the package distributions last week, which is kind of decoupling maybe the two parts of the proposition. Like package distributions can be a very nice syntax to tie it all together, but we're looking at the optional dependency side and how to exclude things during the install, right? And I think this was a great example. I wanted to highlight this issue, but I wanted to propose, follow-up RFC PR, which expands the scope a little bit, right? Because I see you mentioned in that pull request already, like it would be nice to filter by different types of things, right? Like a browser or have a distribution that has tests or not. I know that in the ecosystem, people want these different kinds of use cases, and maybe it's a good way to tie them all together. So I think evolving the conversation instead of just adding yet another top level key like libc, right? Like do kind of a cleanup and bring together everything that might be related to an optional dependency, filtering them out, right? It might be a very good way to steer the conversation here and propose something that will be just like the foundation for building the package distributions on top of it. So try to clean up. I think that's a great idea. So maybe we can propose like a optional dependencies meta or maybe a shorter key. But I do think that's a good idea. And then we can kind of deprecate the current ones, but like probably soft deprecation, that's probably going to take a long while for the ecosystem too. So I kind of like surfaced that to Darcy that we probably want to have this conversation kind of alongside of package distributions. And so I think that's what I had to say here.
Yeah, it does seem like I'm gonna have to do a bit of reading some of my time off this week, just to follow up on some of these conversations. It's async. I don't think this is something like the distributions RFC. I also don't expect to like land anytime soon. There's a bunch of work that we should probably do to it to make sure it's like pretty not fully bulletproof, but the first iteration of what we support there is going to cover enough of the use cases that makes sense. But then also not ideally open up Pandora's box to allow for like infinite conditionals. I'm probably going to sit on this for another week, hopefully, to get some more context myself. And then I know that folks from Vercel have jumped in on the specifically the distributions RFC and have given some feedback as well. And I know that you'd be very happy if we were able to support their use case. So so there's a couple things that I think I need to do just to clean up the initial distributions RFC, and then I do think there needs to be a separate probably RFC for as Roy's alluding to, some sort of like optional dependencies RFC to improve those. So I would be mindful of nesting this information though. I would love to find ways where we're not creating too many new like paradigms. And I know that the existing ecosystem does rely on some of these top level fields for other needs. So if we can get away with potentially reusing the existing top level like information, that might be good. But if it doesn't make sense, then I'm also okay with us like moving away from it. But yeah, that's just sort of my initial kind of feedback on that. Did anybody have any other comments they want to make on these two? So Wes, you made a note as well about the optional depths.
Yeah, if we're going the route of patching this up, one of the things that we really want to do is a basic on-off switch. Can I even build native modules on this platform? That's been a struggle with a lot of developers that I have brought to the Node community, especially on Windows. Maybe it's cleaner now than it was 3 years ago, but we can't assume that everybody even has a working C compiler or C++ or whatever on their machines these days. And it actually sounds to me like we're starting to describe the sort of like a parallel host environment. So we look, as Node.js as a host environment for V8. We're kind of talking about like a host environment for NPM-ish stuff that isn't Node. And if we wound up making that list and branching it, maybe we just turn around and that's where that info goes. Do you have the availability of a compiler? Do you have AMD chip? Do you have 64-bit stuff? And then we'd be able to patch a bunch of that stuff away. For what I'm doing, we actually have a really big headache to try and solve these days, which is how do we ship our native component with our NPM stuff? Right now, we go npm I package, and then we go, oh, and copy this binary in. And it's just horribly ugly. It would be really, really nice to have tooling that would help us do that. One of the problems that we have is that we can't do global installs with native packages because running JIP from inside npm with -- global presents a barrier that developers can get around easily, but most end users can't. And that's the permissions issue, where it tries to, it gives up permissions. You sudo so that you can write to your global, and then it drops the sudo permissions to nobody, and then it tries to write temporary object files in your home directory as nobody, and it fails. So that's, okay, that's out of scope. But if we start to look at that stuff, it'd be really helpful to put some thought space in there, and maybe I should do some thinking offline too.
We are definitely looking at that. Just so you know, we were poked by the build working group, the Node.js build working group, which I think is looking at potentially, and this is probably very long term, but deprecating Node.js itself. Or finding a way. Yeah, sure. But then
they're
a
hoping to, but it's a long road.
Right. So yeah, maybe see it, it often here in the distance. But yeah, you're right. Like, we are interested in how we move forward, like in general, how we support these communities and this tooling, like in more general sense. And we're talking with like the Node project on how like potentially we like debundle Node.js potentially. And then maybe it's something that in the interim comes as a dep of Node, and then we can get it out of npm, and then we can start to like clean up the interface that we or other package managers or tools like essentially interface with. So I think, yeah, it's a very long road, but yeah, there is some movement in this space as well. So yeah.
But yeah, a binary, can it compile? If you're doing optional deps, might not be a bad one to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do. Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention the example of Yes Build folks. I think it's mentioned in the RFC there, but they do this similar sort of setup using optional dependencies today. There is a little bit more hacking involved, but I don't think it's that much. But it's basically checking for the OS and the architecture at the moment of your npm install, and can basically filter, and you only get installed the optional dependency that matches your current OS and architecture. So it might be also a good reference example to look at?
Yeah, basically you can imagine anything that Node, like a Node process, would have access to in terms of like environment variables or like process information, the architecture platform information, OS, like any of that is sort of the scope, I would say, of this initial package distributions conditionals, because we would just use that information to then apply against the dependencies, and then that you could use those to essentially distribute different versions of your package, like that have pre-built like binaries for that specific environment. What I would say is sort of what we have to figure out how we're going to do is kind of like Jordan's use case for other types of information or other types of conditionals that are outside of maybe that information we would get from the process. Yeah, like browser information potentially. Does that mean we'll read package JSON and then just like parse that at the project level or the consumer level and yeah, make that available somehow? I don't know. That's up for debate how we try to like, you know, design around that. So, or we try to make it easier, right? Like detecting, in this case, like detecting whether or not, you know, you have this CLib, like, right? Cool. I want to quickly be mindful of time. We have 12 minutes left. Quickly move to the next item, which is removing shrink wrap files from the unignorable list. I know we had a bit of preamble before I started recording here on this item, but it's number 511. I'll share the link for folks. Jordan, this is yours. I'm not sure what we noted just before we started recording.
Yeah, I mean, so the final goal is that I am able to that I have npm shrinkwrap.json in the npm ignore of every project I have, and the final goal is that config be respected. There is a use case where allowing this file to be ignorable could break somebody, and that use case, as I understand it, is they are using a files field. They have a shrink wrap file present. They expect their shrink wrap file to be published, and they fail to list the shrink wrap file explicitly in the files field. And in that scenario, this change might break them by failing to include the shrink wrap file. And in that case, that would be Semper Major. However, outside of that scenario, I don't think it would break anyone. And so my hope is that when someone isn't using a files field, that shrink wrap can be ignorable as a Semper patch even. Maybe a minor, but like not a major. And that when they are using a files field that does list the shrink wrap file, nothing changes for them. And when they're using a files field and no shrink wrap file is present, then nothing changes for them. But if they're using a files field, there's a shrink wrap file present and they haven't listed it, then it would still include it for now, but give them a warning and say this will be changed in, you know, a future version of npm. And then the Semper Major part would be changing that. And that if we were cool with that, then that would allow my use case to be met immediately, and eventually would do the more consistent thing of just having it. You have to explicitly mention it when you want to include it.
Go ahead, Frank.
So can you just explain again? I got confused in the very beginning. The use case for that. What is the reason? Yeah, you want to kind of.
So I made a shrink wrap file because I was testing a package that reads it, but I don't use lock files in any of my packages, and I have all the 3 common lock file format file names listed in gitignore and npm ignore in every single project. As a result, I never want a npm shrink wrap file included with a package. And even if I was using package lock, like I wouldn't want to ship a lock file, because when you ship a lock file with a package, you prevent the consumer from being able to dedupe, and you that's something that there's very few use cases in my eyes where that's not a user hostile thing. And I actually broke, because the shrink wrap file I was generating was not the correct one for the package. I was playing with things. It broke my consumers. when I published. Of many of those consumers were me, but nonetheless, it broke my consumers because that wasn't expected to be included. And so my hope is that by listing it in gitignore/npm ignore, that it, like every other file except README and package JSON, and I think that's it. There's a short, I mean, there's a few others, but it's a very short list. Like I would expect it to be ignored. And so the RFC is to ask that it be ignorable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for explaining. So the way I see it, it's the npm shrink wrap. It's a very explicit contract, like, and people using it really want it to behave that way, right? And well, but it's just that to me, it sounds like a really big change to just drop, just do not consider npm shrink wrap like you know, like the package JSON and the README that you cannot ignore, right? Like it's an essential file.
Any node project that was created on npm 5 or later will use package lock.json by default, right? And so my expectation is that, and then corporate applications, it doesn't matter because they're never published. So these people aren't affected regardless. And all of the places I know that have a file named npm-shrinkwrap are corporate applications. But I'm sure there's more. It's just that's the ones I've encountered. I agree that if someone has made a publishable package and has npm shrinkwrap there, that they probably want it. But in that case, it will be git committed, probably. And if it's git ignored, then their npm ignore will exist and not include the file name, meaning they will have, or they'll use the files field and maybe they forgot to put it in because they were and that's the Semper Major part. But but in the cases where they're making the explicit choice, I would expect them to explicitly include the file name in that list.
The thing is, conceptually, npm shrinkwrap is at the same pedestal, let's say, as package JSON. You never include package JSON in a
but that
file.
I don't agree that it is, because the package can't work without the package JSON. The shrinkwrap file is like index.js. It's like an implementation detail of the package.
So I'd be mindful, like it has been that way. So like there is sort of a standard already. So with the way what we're saying is that right now, at least, even in code, it's codified that way, that right now package JSON and shrinkwrap are treated that way based on that kind of
I think that if we did a Gzemnid search or whatever, the NPM registry search, I would be very shocked if we found packages that included a shrink-wrap file and used the files field and omitted the shrink-wrap file name from it. I'm not saying that let me rephrase. I wouldn't be shocked if there were non-zero. I'd be shocked if that number is 2 digits. Like I would expect less than 10 packages to be accidentally benefiting from this. And if any of those packages have been published in the last 5 years, I will personally go fix that for them before NPM makes this change, if that would be sufficient. But I am that confident that it's just not a thing that matters. It's a conceptual breaking change, which is why I'm not arguing that we try to make it outside of a Semper Major for that use case. But it's only a conceptual breaking change for that narrow subset. And I am very convinced that narrow subset is, in practice, doesn't really exist.
Go ahead, Wes. I see your hands up.
Observation that this actually comes down to the fact that we're using npm ignore and git ignore as if they have the exact same precedence. If this was ignored in npm ignore, Jordan's use case would be meetable because he'd be able to ignore it.
That's true.
Maybe there's a way that we could look at it and say, hey, if it's ignored in if it's ignored in git ignore, keep the current behavior. If it's ignored in npm ignore, actually ignore it. And that would be the only change that it would be at that point. Somebody's made an npm ignore file. They've put that in it. They say, I really don't want this published. The odds of that breaks somebody is really, really, really close to zero, because they've actually said, don't publish this. And then they're relying on the side effect of publishing it anyway.
So I agree with your logic, and I have to go real quick. That's why I'm cutting off. Not all of my projects have an npm ignore. The only ones that have an npm ignore are projects that have some form of a build process and many of my projects don't. So like, I do have a lot of projects that just git ignore it, and then I expect that that is sufficient.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Roy. I apologize.
I was
I'm trying
just-
to take notes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to compliment here, yeah, that what Wes explained here was exactly what I was contemplating when I first saw this, and that I think is feasible, and even that I would maybe call a Semver major. So I still think it's a lot of tweaking and implementation to make it happen, because currently Npm wrap is just part of these essential files. But that I could see like could make sense, right? You're explicitly putting the npm wrap in your npm ignore. You probably don't want it there. So that I think makes sense. But yeah, just removing it completely, I'm still kind of very worried that that could be a big problem.
Yeah, so I mean that's fair, and if you want to treat it all as Semver major, so be it. I'm like, of all people, I'm not arguing that that it's a good idea to like violate Semver, even if it's not going to actually break anyone. But I'm still convinced it won't actually break anyone. And like, I think if we did a search of the public registry, I suspect that there are some potential conclusive results that would come out of there that would make everyone relax, because this is a change that only affects published packages. And so like, it doesn't only affect, like, it might affect someone with a private registry that they're publishing to, but like, I think that would give a really solid indicator of whether this is a thing that matters to people.
Yeah, we can definitely circle back on this next week. I know we only have a couple minutes left here, and also give async feedback, please. If you commented here, I've tried to take some notes as well. With the 1 minute we have left, I just wanted to note that there were 4 other RFCs that we didn't get to today. For 4260, which is the adding a reify hook, which we're still discussing, and I think it's going to stay open for a while. And then this 4227, I think we just have forgotten to take this off the agenda. This is essentially something that has already been closed, and we're not going to change the defaults of save prefix. So took that off for now. Let me know if folks think that we want to bring that back up next week. And then the last 2 we'll keep on the radar for next week. Notably, they'll require some changes from our team. That's 522, which is adding some better, I think, white space and carriage return support into npm diff. We know that git diff supports this, so it'd be great if we did. And then also 525, which is an outstanding issue that we've been having with carrying around an integrity value for git deps, which we'd like to consider dropping in the next major. So those are just the outstanding PRs and RFCs. If you're interested in giving some async feedback, we'll try to get to them next week. But appreciate everybody jumping on today, and hopefully see you next week. Cheers.
Thank you.